talk to us about the importance of emotional intelligence and getting on with people, and your character in getting to the dizzy heights of a listed company.
Sure, yeah, and I think the most important thing to say first of all is you do see a lot of kind of arguments around IQ versus EQ, and I'm not about to kind of jump in and feel that, I've worked with highly intellectual people for many, many years, and they are superb, individuals. IQ is incredibly important. I'm not subscribed to the fact that it's not important. But once you've got whatever IQ you've got and whatever personality you've got it. You're kind of stuck with it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You can tweak it a little bit, particularly personality. You can round the edges off your Myers-Briggs profile or your DISC profile, but you are who you are to some degree. EQ is really different. So the thing that fascinated me when I was doing some of my coaching studies earlier this year down in London was starting to get into the research on emotional intelligence and the effect of the emotional quotient and what that's all about. And just for anybody who doesn't kind of know what it is, it's the kind of ability to understand ourselves, so self-perception, self-management, how we manage relationships, how we deal with stress, how we solve problems utilizing emotional information. And that bit's particularly key. How do we solve problems utilizing emotional information? How does it affect us positively or negatively? And, Dan Goleman is a kind of a leader in this field, and he talks about a slightly different model. It's highly correlated with the one that I use. The reason I use the EQ one I do is because that's what the qualification I've got in EQ through multi-health systems. We can test emotional intelligence utilizing those things. But I just think that for me, it's highly important because actually it can create the differentiation. It's how you work with people. It's how you relate to people. And I guess, if I look at myself and, thanks for your compliments about where I've got to, but it's come from EQ, that's where it is. It's about being interested in other people, getting on with other people, working with other people, and utilizing that in your work. That they're the key skills in work, and they're the key skills in life. So I think EQ is absolutely vital in the modern workplace.
And is there an element of, learning to count to 10 before you speak? There's the famous book, about the chimp paradox and keeping chimp in place. So you're an analytical person. So, how have you adapted your style to communicate better with other people, perhaps extroverts that, can get... You will have been in board meetings and various situations where, I don't know, the stock price is going down, there's high stress, there's redundancies, maybe there's some fires that you've got to put out, and you've got to then be calm, collected. People are looking at your mood as one of the business leaders, and that's setting the culture, the mood of the office. How do you manage your stress when that's going on, and how do you manage your own emotions, especially if you've got, I don't know, stuff going wrong at work, but also maybe stuff going wrong at home? How do you stay cool as a cucumber?
It's a really great question, and you actually answered it right at the beginning of what you said. There's loads of fantastic things I've discovered in lots of research and studies over the last over 2020. Studying's been a key theme for me, and research. And there's lots of things that you kind of look at as these old tales and old proverbs and all the rest of it. Count to 10 is actually based in neuroscience. I mean, it's just great advice. The definition of emotional intelligence maturity through Dan Goleman, who, as I say, is a leader in this field from a sort of self-management perspective, is maturity is about the gap between your initial thought and what you say. And as you develop your maturity, you do pause. And the reason you need to pause is because the first thing that happens is an emotional wave comes over you. And that emotional wave is going to dominate your thinking. Now, the good news is that, it's only a minute or so before it's gone. Now, when it's gone, you might choose not to ignore it, but allow your rational brain, back to your Martin Peters, who's an amazing chap for your Chimp Paradox book. Take that moment, take that thought. It doesn't mean that you should ignore that initial thought, but understand what it is. Understand it's an emotional reaction. Unfortunately, we haven't evolved hugely from a kind of neuroscience perspective over the years. We're still kind of dominated by what we were given through initial evolution. And so, the kind of fight or flight thing is still in us. We're wired to actually respond really, really quickly. We have to work really hard not to. In terms of how I would have dealt with that, in those board meetings and all those situations, I was very fortunate that I worked with a good board that had good debate and good discussion and didn't promote a kind of highly charged environment. So that was really strong. But in answering it honestly, I deal with it a lot better today following all the work I've done over the last 9 months than I would have done 2 years ago. And that's what learning is about, isn't it? It's about lifelong learning and kind of, always being interested in learning. So, yeah.
Absolutely, that's interesting. So if you've just joined us, you're watching Sean in the Shed, and on the show today we've got Ade Lingard, who's the founder of North Peak Consulting, and we're talking about emotional intelligence. So if you've got friends, family, contacts and others that might be interested in this video, do tag them in the comment stream, and you can hashtag share Sean in the Shed on social media. We are looking for future guests to the show, so do direct message me here on LinkedIn if you're interested. But the question that myself and Ade would like to ask you, the audience, today is, what is the difference between EQ and IQ? We were just talking about that just then. So if you've got thoughts, opinion, ideas on that, do fill in the comment stream. But let's fire that question back to you, Ade. What is the difference? Because IQ is, I guess, how intellectually clever I am. And there's various tests you can do of that. I saw recently a newspaper comparing the world leaders and their IQs. And then you've got the EQ, which is, once armed with that intelligence, how do you deal with people? And business is very much about managing people, isn't it? Most businesses are people dependent. So talk us through those differences and why you think it matters when it comes to career management, growth, and fulfillment, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. And we talked a little bit about it already, but effectively the intellectual quotient, as I say, you develop it at a fairly early age. You've kind of got what you've got. My age, you've kind of got what you've got. And personality is very similar. And I want to make that point because people often think EQ, all right, we're talking about personality. I've done Myers-Briggs. It's really different to personality. It's a skill that you can learn and it's malleable. And with your EQ, you can effectively look at the various components. And the model that I work with has got around about 15 components in it within the 5 things I talked about earlier: self-perception, self-management, etc. But it's all about relationships. And the reason I'm passionate about this work, I guess, Sean, it's kind of, why is the guy with a data and analytical background banging on about this kind of softer skills? Well, I just think it's vital. Data is a key currency of business now and will be for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And lots of data rational people have got a really high IQ. And that's absolutely wonderful. We need that. But how you communicate that data, how you use that data, how you understand the impact it's going to have on other people, that's going to be the difference between, great success and just doing okay. And so for me, EQ is really important. It's important for leaders. You've got to understand where your team are. It doesn't mean that you have to go with where they are. Within the model, it's looking at kind of how you deal with assertiveness, how you deal with independence of thought, and a variety of different things. But you've got to understand where people are in order to make your own decisions, in order to take your team with you. I often talk to people about there's no point in standing in a corner, a metaphorical corner, shouting to people in the other corner, "Oi, come over here, it's great where I'm stood." You have to walk over there. You have to talk to them, put your arm around them and get them to walk to the other corner with you. And that requires emotional intelligence. It requires good understanding of people. It doesn't require a high IQ. And what you find as a leader is lots of leaders have got great IQs anyway. The differentiating factor is EQ. Differentiates success from failure.